I'm Christina Rogers. I'm the principal here at Bainbridge High School. This is my first year here at Bainbridge, and previous to Bainbridge, I was in Seattle Public Schools serving as a school leader for 12 years. I think something that can be frustrating for students in this process is a misunderstanding of how school administrators can apply discipline when students bring concerns of alleged sexual assault our way. I use the word alleged, and that this is a great example, not because I don't believe the story that a student's telling me, but because until a situation is actually brought before a judge in a courtroom, it is alleged. And the crux of it is the due process. So students understanding that anyone involved in a situation has the right to tell their side of the story. That's due process. And the school must follow due process laws. That can be really hard when it feels like the situation involves harm, where students are feeling harmed, emotionally harmed, physically harmed, and they are potentially walking the halls in a school community with someone who they feel has harmed them. So it's that sweet spot of wanting to make sure that someone bringing forth a complaint of harm feels supported, while also keeping in mind, bearing in mind that the person who allegedly harmed them also has the right to feel supported and safe at school. This is where the role of the school administrator can become very complicated very fast, and where we can get sideways with students who don't understand why we may not be applying school discipline, removing someone from school. That's often not something that will happen in these cases, and it's often a point of confusion for students. Again, this is not about whether we believe or don't believe the story that a student brings to us about how they've been harmed, but simply how we have to follow due process laws. That's where those safety plans come into place. We oftentimes can do our best to separate students who are involved in a conflict while something's being investigated. And so we do our best to potentially do schedule changes, create walking paths, frequent check-ins with students about how they're feeling, outside counseling while we're supporting a student through this process. But the school discipline piece is often a confusion for students as well, because it's a visual representation that the school did something. And oftentimes when students don't see a student removed from school, such as in a suspension, there's also a belief perhaps that the school didn't do anything, because they don't know what we're doing, because it's behind the scenes and it has to remain confidential. So that's a hard one, because I think this is where things get sticky around a belief that the school doesn't respond or chooses not to respond, when in reality we're obligated to respond, but the way we respond has to be confidential. Supporting survivors at school is our highest priority, and the ways that we do that are varied. But consistently, I think the biggest piece is just a belief in that student's story and making sure that they know that they have a safe person to talk to. They can come to a counselor, any trusted adult, an administrator. We can help support that student in creating an individualized safety plan. We can help connect them with outside services if they're looking for therapy beyond what the school can provide with a school counselor. We also, at times, can create groups. We've created groups in the past where peers have been able confidentially to sit in space with other survivors and talk about their story, if that's something that feels comfortable. It's not, again, this is an individualized process for students, and certainly wanting to have their voice drive the process. But ultimately, the biggest through line for us just is around students knowing that they're heard and that they're believed. When students report sexual assault at school, we know how important it is that they know that they are believed. And a big part of helping students through this process is maintaining that belief in their story and making sure that they understand that we can help them to provide the supports that they need, whether that be through meeting with a school counselor, referring to outside therapy. Sometimes groups can be run within the school that are super confidential for students who want to speak with peers who may be feeling and experiencing something similar to where they're at. Alongside of that, I think the other piece about the belief is making sure that we can do everything we can to support students in that space of safety. whether it's creating an individualized safety plan for a student, making a schedule change, or just, again, regular check-ins with a trusted adult at school. That is our highest priority. So I think the biggest piece to know when Bainbridge High School receives a report of alleged sexual assault is that we obviously want to create a space where students feel safe to talk about whatever it is, whatever level of detail they want to share with us. That's my biggest piece. I think similar to our counseling team, making sure students feel like they're heard and that their voice matters and that they're believed. Weaving into that, there's some, the complication of helping students to also understand that the details that they shared with us do trigger our mandatory reporting laws, which means that we are going to need to share some level of detail with Child Protective Service as well as Bainbridge Island Police Department. And then also making sure that students' family is aware of the concern that they've brought to us. So certainly those pieces, that's a pretty high level overview, but certainly wanting to make sure that within that, students are also feeling that this isn't just a process that we walk through, that we care about their safety, we care about their story, and that they're believed.
Hi, I'm Nicole Westcott. I'm a counselor at Bainbridge High School, and this is my 8th school year. So when any student comes into the Bainbridge High School Counseling Department to file any sort of report, especially in terms of sexual assault, the first thing we want to do is make sure that that student feels comfortable and feels heard throughout the process, because telling these stories to someone that they might have a relationship or might not can be extremely difficult. As counselors, we want to make sure that their voice is heard, and also that they understand that we are mandated reporters. So what they do tell us, we do have to file a report with Child Protective Services and with Bainbridge Island Police Department, which sometimes can be confusing to students, especially if they're feeling safe enough to come and tell us our story. But it's really to make sure that they're safe, because if any student is threatening to harm themselves, or if someone else is threatening to harm them, we have to take those extra measures to make sure that they're safe. Another thing too that we ask students is whether or not their parents know of this incident. More often than not they do, but if families don't, then we work with the students on how we can come together to share that this incident took place. Because I think at the end of the day, the most important thing is to have these students feel supported, and also just aware of the next steps that they can take in order to get justice served in however they would like. So I think a great way to support survivors at school is to have that student's counselor continuing to reach out and check in with them. Maybe that's something where the student needs once a week check-in or once a month, just so they know that after their incident was reported, and as they're going through that process, should they decide to file a report with BIPD, that's not just it, oh, okay, well, that's all, we're not here to help anymore. And so I really think that having a counselor follow up with them throughout that school year is really important. We can also work with administration to do sort of walking paths. So to really ensure that that student won't see that alleged perpetrator as much as they would normally see them on campus. So ensuring that there are no classes together, trying to be in different buildings as the school day goes on is really important as well. We also connect students with outside resources. So KidSAP, a sexual assault center. They also have therapists that students can call 24/7. We can also link them up with other outside resources through therapy. But I think personally, my number one thing is to make sure that students know that we have their back throughout the entire process. I think that's the most important way to have a student feel heard throughout this really difficult time.